Jake, an engineer stationed on a deep space outpost, was used to the monotonous hum of machinery and the vast emptiness of space. It was a quiet existence, one that offered little in the way of surprises. That was, until the day he found her. While conducting routine maintenance outside the station, Jake's scanner picked up a faint signal from a nearby asteroid. Curious and cautious, he decided to investigate. As he navigated his small craft closer, he saw the faint outline of a small escape pod lodged in the rocky surface. The pod was Xylaran, a race that had only recently made contact with humanity. Inside the pod was a young Xylaran girl, unconscious but alive. Her name was Liora. Jake brought her back to the station where she slowly regained consciousness. Her eyes, a mesmerizing swirl of colors, met his with a mixture of fear and hope. "Thank you," she said in halting English. "I am Liora. I need help." Jake was taken aback but quickly composed himself. "I'm Jake. What happened to you?" Liora explained that she was on a journey to find someone who could help her complete the activation ritual. Without it, she would become inactive and eventually die, just like so many others of her kind. Jake listened, intrigued and concerned. "What does this activation involve?" Liora hesitated, looking embarrassed. "It's, complicated. It requires a deep physical and emotional connection with another being. My people have struggled to find partners who understand or are willing." Jake's mind raced. The implications were enormous. "So, you need someone to connect with you?" She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "Yes. Without it, I don't have much time left." The ethical and emotional weight of her words hit Jake hard. He had always been a problem solver, but this was beyond anything he had ever encountered. "Okay, Liora, let's figure this out together. You can stay here while we work on a solution." Over the next few days, Jake and Liora spent hours talking. He learned about Xylaran culture, their unique abilities, and the tragic fate of those who failed to activate. Liora, in turn, listened to Jake's stories of Earth and his life on the outpost. As they grew closer, Jake couldn't help but feel a growing sense of responsibility and connection to Liora. He knew he had to help her, but the nature of the activation ritual weighed heavily on his mind. Could he be the one to save her? And what would it mean for both of them if he did? One evening, as they watched the stars from the station's observation deck, Liora turned to Jake, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "Jake, I don't want to pressure you, but my time is running out. I need to know if you're willing to help me complete the ritual." Jake looked at her, feeling the gravity of her request. "Liora, I want to help you, but we need to understand everything involved before we make any decisions. Let's take it one step at a time." Liora smiled, a mix of relief and anxiety in her expression. "Thank you, Jake. I trust you." With that, they continued their journey, knowing that the days ahead would test their courage, their understanding, and their growing bond. The following days were a whirlwind of learning and exploration for Jake and Liora. Jake had his hands full trying to understand the Xylaran activation ritual and its intricacies. He reached out to every contact he had, searching for any scrap of information that could help them. One night, while poring over some old texts provided by a friend at the Interspecies Relations Department, Jake found something promising. "Liora, I think I found a detailed description of the ritual," he said, calling her over. Liora sat beside him, her colorful eyes scanning the text. "This is very accurate," she said, a hint of awe in her voice. "But it's not just a physical connection. It's an emotional and mental synchronization, too." Jake furrowed his brow. "So, it's like forming a deep bond on every level." Liora nodded. "Yes, the activation isn't just about physical interaction. It's about truly understanding and accepting each other, connecting on a fundamental level." That's why it's so difficult. Many beings aren't willing to open themselves up completely like that. Jake took a deep breath. Well, it sounds intense, but not impossible. How do we start? Liora hesitated. First, we need to build trust. We have to share our thoughts and emotions openly. It's intimate and requires vulnerability. All right, Jake said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. I guess we should start with the basics. Let's share something personal, something we haven't told anyone else. Liora looked down, gathering her thoughts. I'll go first, she said softly. When I was a child, I watched my sister become inactive. She couldn't find a partner for her activation. It was devastating. I've been afraid of the same fate ever since. Jake's heart ached for her. I'm so sorry, Liora. That must have been incredibly hard. She gave a small nod, her eyes glistening. Your turn. Jake swallowed hard, then spoke. I had a fiancée back on Earth. We were planning to get married, but she died in an accident. It's part of the reason I took this job out here, to get away from the memories. Liora reached out and touched his hand, her fingers cool and gentle. Thank you for sharing that, Jake. I can feel your pain, and it helps me understand you better. Over the next few weeks, they continued to share their deepest fears, dreams, and memories. They spent hours in deep conversation, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day. One day, while working on a maintenance project together, Liora looked at Jake with a serious expression. I think we're ready to take the next step, Jake. We need to start the physical part of the ritual. Jake nodded, his heart pounding. I'm ready if you are. They spent the evening preparing a space in the observation deck where they could be surrounded by the beauty of the stars. The atmosphere was filled with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. As they stood facing each other, Jake took Liora's hands in his. No matter what happens, we're in this together. Liora smiled, her eyes glowing softly. Together. With that, they began the ritual, focusing on their connection and the bond they had formed. The room seemed to hum with energy as they synchronized their thoughts and emotions, their breaths mingling in the stillness. It was a profound experience, unlike anything Jake had ever felt. He could sense Liora's essence merging with his, their souls intertwining in a dance of light and warmth. It was both exhilarating and terrifying, but he never wavered, determined to see it through for her. As the night wore on, they felt a shift, a subtle but powerful change that signaled the completion of the first stage of the activation. They collapsed onto the floor, exhausted but elated. We did it, Liora whispered, her voice filled with wonder. Jake smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Yeah, we did. But they both knew this was just the beginning. The true test lay ahead, and they would need all their strength and trust to face it. In the days that followed, Jake and Liora found themselves even more deeply intertwined. The first stage of the activation had created a connection between them that transcended words. They communicated with a glance, a touch, and shared emotions that ebbed and flowed between them like a gentle tide. Yet the external pressures were mounting. The outpost's commander, Captain Reynolds, had started asking questions. The arrival of an alien in need of an unorthodox ritual had not gone unnoticed. One evening, as Jake and Liora sat together in the observation deck, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. Jake, report to my office immediately. Jake sighed, giving Liora's hand a reassuring squeeze. I'll be back soon. In Captain Reynolds' office, the atmosphere was tense. The captain, a stern woman with a no-nonsense attitude, looked up from her desk as Jake entered. Jake, we need to talk about Liora, she began, her tone brooking no argument. We've received communications from the Xylaran Council. They're concerned about her welfare and the impact of this ritual on our outpost. Jake stood firm. Captain, Liora needs this to survive. If we don't help her, she'll die. The captain sighed, leaning back in her chair. I understand the gravity of the situation, but we need to consider the risks. This is uncharted territory for both our species. There could be unforeseen consequences. Jake's frustration bubbled over. So what do you propose? Letting her die because we're afraid of the unknown? Reynolds' expression softened slightly. No, of course not. But we need to ensure this is done safely and with full understanding of the implications. We can't afford any missteps. Jake nodded, a plan forming in his mind. Then let's bring in experts, people who can help us navigate this. We don't have much time, but we can't give up on her. After a long pause, the captain finally agreed. All right, Jake. We'll get the experts, but proceed with caution. We're all in this together. Returning to Liora, Jake filled her in on the conversation. She listened intently, worry etched on her face. Do you think they'll understand? She asked quietly. We'll make them understand, Jake said firmly. We're not giving up. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Experts from both human and Xylaran sides were brought in, and the outpost became a hub of interspecies cooperation. Jake and Liora spent hours with scientists and diplomats, explaining the intricacies of the activation ritual and their progress so far. Despite the intense scrutiny, Jake and Liora found solace in each other. Their bond continued to grow, a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. They knew that the final stage of the activation was approaching, and with it, the ultimate test of their connection. One night, as they lay side by side in the observation deck, Liora spoke softly. Jake, I can feel the end drawing near. The last stage of the ritual is the most intense. We'll need to trust each other completely. Jake looked into her eyes, his resolve unwavering. I trust you, Liora. We've come this far together and we'll see it through. The final stage required a deeper synchronization than ever before. They spent hours preparing, meditating, and sharing their deepest thoughts and fears. The bond between them pulsed with a life of its own, a testament to their unwavering commitment. As the time approached, they stood together, hearts beating in unison. The room was filled with a palpable energy, a mixture of anticipation and determination. Are you ready? Jake asked, his voice steady. Liora nodded, her eyes shining with a mix of fear and hope. Yes, together. They began the final stage, their bodies and minds merging in a symphony of light and emotion. The intensity was overwhelming, but they held on to each other, guided by their unbreakable bond. As the ritual reached its climax, a brilliant light enveloped them, and for a moment, they were one. Two beings intertwined in a perfect harmony of existence. When the light faded, they collapsed, exhausted but alive. They had done it. The activation was complete. Jake looked at Liora, who smiled weakly, tears of relief streaming down her face. We did it, she whispered, her voice filled with awe. Jake pulled her close, feeling the weight of their journey lift from his shoulders. Yes, we did. Together. They knew that their lives would never be the same, but they faced the future with hope and strength, their bond unbreakable. In the aftermath of the final stage of the activation, the outpost buzzed with a mixture of relief and cautious optimism. The experts from both human and Xylaran sides were eager to document the unprecedented success of Jake and Liora's bond. But for Jake and Liora, the journey was far from over. They spent the following days recuperating, their connection deeper than ever. Liora's health had stabilized, and her vibrant energy was a testament to the ritual's success. Jake felt an overwhelming sense of pride and protectiveness towards her. One evening, as they sat on the observation deck, watching the stars, Liora turned to Jake. Thank you, Jake, for everything. I don't think I would have survived without you. Jake squeezed her hand gently. It wasn't just me, Liora. We did this together. I couldn't have done it without you either. Their quiet moment was interrupted by a message from Captain Reynolds. Jake, Liora, please report to the conference room. The council is ready to speak with you. Jake felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. The council's reaction could determine their future. He glanced at Liora, who gave him a reassuring smile. Let's face this together, she said. In the conference room, the faces of the human and Xylaran council members appeared on the large screen. Captain Reynolds stood beside Jake and Liora, her presence a steadying influence. A human council member spoke first. Jake, Liora, we have reviewed the data and the reports from the experts. This is an extraordinary achievement. You have demonstrated that our species can form profound connections far deeper than we previously thought possible. A Xylaran council member nodded in agreement. Liora, your survival and the successful completion of the activation ritual provide hope for many of our people. This collaboration has opened new avenues for understanding and cooperation between our species. Leora's eyes sparkled with emotion. Thank you, councils. We only did what we had to do, for survival and for each other. Captain Reynolds stepped forward. There are still many unknowns and challenges ahead. We need to continue studying this connection and ensure it can be replicated safely. The human council member nodded. Agreed. We propose establishing a joint task force to explore the implications and applications of this bond. Jake and Liora, we would like you to be a part of this initiative. Jake felt a mix of relief and responsibility. We'd be honored to help, he said. There's so much we still don't know, but we're willing to do whatever it takes to ensure this knowledge benefits both our species. After the meeting, as they walked back to the observation deck, Liora took Jake's hand. We've come so far, Jake. I'm grateful for every step of this journey with you. Jake smiled. And it's just the beginning. We have a lot of work ahead, but we'll face it together. Life on the outpost began to shift. The joint task force brought in new faces, human and Xylaran, working side by side. Jake and Liora became the symbols of interspecies cooperation and understanding. They shared their experiences, guided new couples through the activation process, and contributed to groundbreaking research. Months passed, and their bond grew stronger. The outpost transformed into a beacon of hope, a place where human and Xylaran cultures melded together in harmony. Liora thrived, her health fully restored, and Jake found a renewed sense of purpose. One day, as they stood on the observation deck watching a Xylaran ship dock at the outpost, Liora leaned against Jake. Do you think we'll ever see Earth and Xylaran homeworlds working together like this? Jake wrapped his arm around her. I believe we will. It might take time, but we've proven that it's possible. And with people like us leading the way, there's nothing we can't achieve. Liora smiled, her eyes reflecting the stars. I'm glad we found each other, Jake. Me too, Liora. Me too. Together they faced the future with hope, their bond a testament to the power of connection and the endless possibilities that lay ahead for their intertwined worlds. Subscribe to watch more amazing sci-fi stories.